Hey everyone, so this lecture is on two pieces of punctuation that I sometimes say they're brothers or they're friends. They're somewhat related, the colon and the semicolon. And I'd like you to just try using these in your paper one each. Like, here's my attempt at a colon, Bryan, or here's a sentence that uses a semicolon. And probably just do it once. Sometimes I teach the semicolon and then people get really semicolon happy and they're using it all the time. And just make it part of your repertoire, but something that doesn't cycle back in too often. So let's do colon. Even though colon isn't used as often, colon's like the less used of the two. Let's do that first because its use is fairly restricted and it's easier to comprehend, I think. So I have just started off by noting one potential difference between the two of them, and that is that with a semicolon, you have a sentence and then you have a sentence. You can use a conjunctive adverb, which I talk about in another lecture, or you can just use a semicolon. It's totally fine. You don't have to have a conjunctive adverb. But in that case, it is two sentences. Sometimes I have students, I don't know why you do this. You have a sentence and then a semicolon and then a fragment. That's weird. Don't do that. Sentence, semicolon, sentence. The colon is a little bit more specific. So you have this sentence and then you have your colon, and then what comes after can be a sentence, frequently is not a sentence, and it will always tell you more about what's talked about prior to the colon. So I have some examples. This is not about you personally, it's just a sentence I wrote. You hurt your grade in the following ways, colon. Arriving late to class, routinely leaving early for a doctor's appointment, checking your cell phone every 5 minutes, and writing your papers at the last second. And everything that comes after the colon is giving you some details about the ways that you hurt your grade. And that is how a colon functions. Details about something before the colon. Now, you all will think of a list. Oftentimes when I ask students to do this, they'll just say apples, oranges, tangerines, and grapefruit. The fruits I like, colon. And it's true. Sometimes, most of the time, maybe 70% of the time, that's what you're giving me, is a list of things. But that's not the only thing you can do with a colon. And I'd like you to try doing this next thing because it's really super cool. So in this third example, we enjoyed the funky atmosphere of Tucson, colon. It reminded us in some ways of how Portland used to be years ago. This thing that happens after tells you more about the funky atmosphere. So it's the same concept, but that's not a list. Notice it's a sentence actually. So sometimes what follows can be a sentence. And because you aren't so used to doing that, that's what I'd like you to try. Second part needs to tell you more information about the first part. Okay? And I for sure we're going to practice that. I can just sense it coming. Okay. So now we're going to move on to the semicolon. My example is, Sarah was my boss, semicolon. After a year or two, she resigned due to health issues. Notice that this is about sequence. This thing, she was my boss, and then she wasn't my boss. And this thing happened after this thing. And so it's not really telling you much about the first part, it's just telling you a sequence of events. And this can be a use of the semicolon. I tried to play soccer. Eventually, I decided I was better at cross country. Sequence of events. That's a perfect opportunity for a semicolon. Okay. Now, I gave you sort of a fancy, like, writing 122 example after that. Typically, Portuguese explorers held a hatred towards Muslims. Semicolon, primarily, they were interested in turning a profit, though. I'm telling you two things about the Portuguese when they went into Asia. I'm telling you they didn't like Muslims, and I'm telling you they were interested in the profit. Now, this is when I said that some people use it incorrectly. This is a classic example of how someone's going to screw it up. So typically, Portuguese explorers held a hatred towards Muslims. So I'm expecting a sentence, because remember it combines two sentences, and a student writes, being Catholic and having a long history of wars with them in the Crusades. This is an authentic thing that I see in papers all the time. And the problem is, you can test it by saying, is what comes after the semicolon a sentence? So if I say to you, being Catholic and having a long history of wars with them in the Crusades, you're still waiting for the main part of the sentence, hopefully. It's not a sentence on its own, it's a fragment. And so this is the issue of sentence, semicolon, fragment. Doesn't work. Can't do it. Looks a little weird. So, how often? I said at the very beginning. You can use semicolons a little bit more often than colon. Colon, use it once the entire paper. At least, don't use it more than twice on the page. It looks too weird. I'm being somewhat jokey by saying this. Just don't use it very often, whereas semicolon, use it a little bit more often. But try using it both, because I promise you, I don't see either one of these guys in your papers. Coming into Writing with 15, they're absent. They're totally absent. And they're pieces of punctuation that people who know how to write use. Not all the time, but they know how to use them in a pinch. Okay? So far I've given you now 3 ways to combine sentences. Fanboy, semicolon with a conjunctive adverb, and now semicolon by itself, and sometimes colon. So use all of them. I think you can do it. I want to see it. Okay. Good luck.